more questions than you had. You're going to wonder what you did, why you were here, other than we're going to play a Kahoot. The top 30 scores win a gift card. So, yes. And then the remainder of the time, we're going to talk about the CDC milestones, which were recently updated in April-ish of 2022. And we're going to talk about what that means, what it means in regards to parents, but specifically what it means in regards to professionals. So, to get started, I need you guys to not look at the screen, cheaters. Close your eyes. Okay. All right. So this is a
love it.
Yeah, it'll check something.
This is a web called Kahoot. So essentially what we're going to do is we are going to have everybody get their cell phones out. This is one time where you're permitted. And you're going to go to up here, Kahoot.it. And then you're going to enter that PIN number, and it's going to put you in this Kahoot room. And you get to pick a nickname, or you can use your own name if you want. I will say I did this on the cheap, and only 40 people can join. So if by chance you are not on and you want to be, maybe partner up with someone you think might be good at this. So once you guys enter your name, we're going to start seeing people pop up.
All I have to do hit.
Better hurry if you want to get in.
That's what I have to do. You got the end.
I've never recorded.
Yes,
I got a name.
and then we'll put it
Put a
on.
name.
What do you do? Of course it's you. It's so secretive. I put a nickname. Okay, no.
But you might, you have to see your name. Shut up. And then here.
Oh, you have, no, here, look at the mark.
You may have to be just me. With me.
You know, like I kind of get you.
Like I really love mine.
Yeah,
you should be able to get that one.
All right, who raise your hand if you have not ever played Kahoot before? Okay, so we have two practice questions. What it does, it flashes a question. Some are true and false, some are multiple choice, and you're going to see icons on your screen that correspond with the answers. You push your answer on your phone and it tallies up here. But the first two questions are not for points, remember, they're just for practice.
You don't get it.
Okay, who's great? Come on.
I'm gonna guess that's Helen.
Oh, you can change your. Oh, Amy, accessory. Yeah. No. I need a brain.
Are we in? Everybody?
Do I get to choose?
Like I said, tops out of 40 because I'm too cheap to buy the premium. So
Yeah, just click a little point thing. I did a brain with a
Right.
graduation cap.
oh, we don't 11 more spaces.
Not me.
Okay.
Raise your hand if you're still trying to get in, so I know not to start. Okay. Okay. Not to call you guys out or anything. My hope is as we go through this together, we're going to have some time to talk about the questions in between. We're going to have time to do some Q&A after, and then again, go through milestones. I will tell you, if you guys need or want to ask me specific questions about specific evals, I'm going to pause and we can talk about that, not in a group of 50 people. Every eval is different, and there's a million different things that happen and are said and heard. So we're really trying to do a nice overview of eligibility while also tagging along with we start to do eval observations, and then also the team liaisons and me looking at IFSP specifically at the first 2 pages, which include eligibility. So we're hoping all of this really lays some nice foundation for some good discussions moving forward. Like I said, I don't think you're going to walk out of here being like, PD training ever, but it might be the most fun. So, are you guys ready? Ready. Okay, we're gonna start it.
Okay.
Is this a practice? Yes, these are two practice questions. So on your phone, you should have these colors and shapes. You pick on your phone what you think the answer is. This is our timer.
I already did. No wrong answer.
There's 3 wrong answers on that. Okay, one more practice question. Ooh, Courtney, Jesse, good job, Jesse. We went to college together. I'm glad to see you got that one.
They were much better when we were in college.
I know, we were actually good back then.
Oh, is that how it goes?
Okay, second practice question, no points.
I think it matters. Yeah. For sure.
I know, that I was timed for 20 seconds.
Oh. I have 6. I feel like I have 6 of my children. I have 4 animals, 2 dogs, 2 cats, 3 to a good home. Okay, now we start the real deal. Okay, this is where it gets serious business. No joking around.
Hope everyone can say this literally. By myself at home. So. Now, like, tonight. Last night. Wow.
There's brevity.
Spicy.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Some
people recall Are ways children can qualify. We most commonly call this professional judgment, but technically in the eyes of the law, it's called ethical opinion. Any discussion surrounding this, or do we feel pretty good about knowing how children qualify? Silence is golden. Chloe, Tom, Brady, Elf, and Jor. Here we go.
I know, it's a trick question. But I'm gonna defend my answer.
The answer is false.
So I thought trick question.
It's not a trick question. Actually, ironically, it's not a trick question, contrary to what Elf believes. Are you Elf?
Of course I'm out.
So in Kansas, it specifically says one of the first sentences in our Part C procedures manual is we do not work with children who are at risk for developmental delay. Those are children who may be at risk due to social emotional factors. Maybe they were premature, but not below that 27-week-old. Maybe they had low birth weight, but not very low, which is considered less than 1,500 grams. So these are kids who we are not able to serve in our Part C program, but we know there might be something happening in the future. So again, connecting these children and families to programs including Head Start, Parents as Teachers, Healthy Families, all of those resources that do serve children who are at risk. But we are not able to use Part C funding to work with children who are at risk for developmental delay.
I also thought, yeah, I was thinking automatically eligible.
When you're at risk.
That was where I was going with that. That's where I think it's trick.
So at risk and
Different category.
established risks are very different. Established risks are your children who are auto eligible, meaning they do have a diagnosis of some kind. And we do know, even if when we see them at birth, right, an infant with Down syndrome, they may not have a delay in development at that time, but we know moving forward that diagnosis may impact. So that's an established risk,
Got it.
which is different than at risk. Very confusing.
Established.
Okay, let's see how we did there.
I just have to say, I moved up to 4 and then I just got kicked out and it won't let me back in the game. So you're welcome.
You can't be sorry.
It's okay.
No. Okay, here we go.
Fun. I know. And like. I thought.
Yes, all of the above. This one is the most common one we know, that the babies who are born at 27 weeks or below are automatically eligible. A birth or a birth weight of less than 1,000 grams makes them auto eligible. Seizures, ironically, we just had this discussion in Weston. I mistakenly shared with the team that a diagnosis of epilepsy is an auto eligible criteria, which it is. But seizures were not. However, there's a line that says seizures poorly controlled by medication or not controlled by medication. That is an auto eligible criteria, ironically, as well as pediatric HIV and AIDS is. And that one is a very meaningful one to me because years ago I evaluated a child in foster care who had a diagnosis of HIV. She looked great. I said she wasn't eligible. Years later, I saw it and I still remember her, and that was probably a good 10 years ago. So there are lots and lots of criteria on that Part C procedures manual. I was in the process of printing everybody one if they wanted to have a hard copy. Printer broke, someone's on their way to fix it. So, but I will also email that out to you guys. And I would definitely encourage you to have that handy. Whether or not you're an electronic person or a paper person, and refer back to it as many times as possible. It's impossible for Tracy to catch everything at intake, and I know that because I did it for 5 years and Bev did it for 5 years, and there are things that are shared with you guys at an eval that we don't know at intake. For example, lots of times families will kind of offhandedly say, well, they have IUGR. Oh, that's, an important thing to know as we're doing that nutritional history. So take some time, especially now, since I know there are lots of cancellations, and I would definitely encourage you to spend some time reading through that Part C manual so you can just have an idea of what's in there, ranging from prematurity to metabolic disorders, syndromes, all sorts of things are in there. Questions about this particular?
What, I have a question.
Yeah.
So what's the definition of poorly controlled?
Yeah.
There is no, the definition is poorly controlled. So that's one of the wonderful things we know about the state, right, is they give us lots of gray, but when we want black and white, sometimes that's really hard. So I would say if they're on meds and they're still having seizures, I would say those are poorly controlled. And there's no I can't tell you if they're having 2 seizures a day that qualifies. So you just probably have to talk to mom, get medical history. Are they changing lots of meds and dosages because they can't figure it out? That would be something that's poorly controlled if they're still in that process of figuring out what that dosage looks like for the meds. Again, why I told you you'd be disappointed.
Hey, Monica.
Yes.
So because there's that gray area with automatic eligibility, and I see that a lot on my evaluations, like, I don't know, sometimes I'll just say there's a lot of factors here. and this makes this kid automatically eligible, we have the ability to do that based on the variety of factors, right?
Yes, you do, and I'm terrified to like log off of this, because I'm terrified it's gonna go away, but, one of the parts of this is the whole shebang here, but one of the pieces I like best about the auto eligible is this combination of risk factors. So to me, a combination is two. So if they've got any of these risk factors that put them in that category for auto eligible, you can absolutely lean into this as much as possible. And I heard someone say, I thought she said birth weight of 1,500 grams. And that's where I got that, because very low birth weight is considered under 1,500 grams. So I like to say lean into this, especially for the birth to one children. Historically, our program has underserved based on the federal and the state kind of, I don't want to say timelines, but data points. They are looking for about 1.6% of children in our program to be under the age of 12 months. We have never hit that except for last year. So I think you guys are doing a really, really nice job of leaning into this particular piece, which allows us to support children that are under the age of 12 months. So that's a federal data point that they do look for across programs. But this is my favorite one because it does give you a lot of gray. Right, and this job is nothing but gray, let's be honest. So yeah, does that help? Okay, here we go. True or false? Not a trick question.
Connection lost.
You out?
No, I came back.
Ooh. Yeah, so move into our new database. OSIP is asking more and more and more of states regarding demographic information for the child and for the family. And they're also asking for dates, specific dates of diagnoses, whether it was autism. They're not asking for who did it, but they're asking for dates. So hearing loss, vision loss, autism is one of them. So Tracy, again, I know because of intake, whatever information she gets at intake that has medical information for kids specifically coming out of NICU, she makes sure that gets into the child's file. That's considered an outside report. So moving forward as a crew, we're just going to try and do better, right? If we do it one more time than we did last year, that's better. We're going to try and do better at having this outside information documented, because once we get a new database, we're going to have to be uploading these reports into the database for proof and for documentation. So if a child transfers to another county in Kansas, all of that information goes with them, and it's a more complete educational file. So we don't have to worry about anything right now. But again, if you're in an eval and a family says to you, well, they have failure to thrive, again, I would ask them, do you happen to have a doctor's note or a hospital note that says that? And if so, sharing that with us, getting a request of information so we can contact Children's and get that. So you don't have to do all of this yourselves. We just have to figure out, Nikki's happy to fax and gather that information. Whatever comes into us mailed, we scan to you guys. So probably some of you have gotten scanned reports and you're like, is this spam? And it's not, it's a very important report. But we try and keep that going as much as possible. We are not going to be 100% on this. I'm just going to say that's not the goal. But again, that goal is to make sure that we've got that medical documentation to support what we're doing. And we talked about this in West Team. When a family says, well, my child has autism, well, we don't say, well, when were they, who diagnosed? Like, we just take that information, right? Because assuming a parent isn't going to say that unless that's true. But again, doing our due diligence to make sure that child actually meets the auto eligible criteria, we need to have this. Until we have it, we can use informed clinical opinion or developmental delay. So it doesn't stop the eligibility process. It might just change the eligibility reason until we locate this. Does that make
So when
sense?
we do an initial IFSP, if there's no documentation, we cannot use auto eligible on the eligibility page.
We are not supposed to.
Thanks for making it great again, Monica.
Yes. Yeah, we are not supposed to do that. And again, and I'm gonna talk out of both ends, right? We've decided as an agency, I've decided to make children who have been meth exposed auto eligible. We know that exposure to meth in utero changes the brain's development, the shape, the striations. We know that, it's researched. Do we have a lot of documentation to support that, or do we go off of what KBC says? So again, those are things that surprise, Tracy. We'll be talking about more. What other information can we be trying to track down and start that process? So by the time you do get to an IFSP, you guys have what you need. We know nothing comes quick, right? It may not be there when you guys need it. But again, if we don't have that yet, we should be using developmental delay or informed clinical opinion until that documentation comes in. So if you remember, yeah, that'd be great. Yeah. I asked you guys to remember a lot of stuff.
What process do you want us to use? You mentioned Nikki, but I don't think you meant Nikki's going to be requesting all these records.
So
Or
if
do
you
you
guys,
want the FSC to be the?
so Nikki is the only one really that faxes unless you guys come in and manually fax from the copier. So if you need something faxed to Children's or KU,
Request.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, Nikki can do that for you. Yeah. Mhm.
She's probably better at good contact anyways, right?
And
So-
all the faxes come into her, so she sees everything that's coming in too. So, and then she can disperse it. So
Is there a form we can use, or do we just send her an email saying, hey, Nikki, could you get the information from?
So yeah, so we need to make sure we have a release of information, and then what's gonna happen is Children's is gonna ask the family to sign their own release of information before they can share with us. And then once that comes back to Children's, then Nikki can fax that in, and yeah, it can just be on the fax cover sheet. She usually just requests all medical records be sent, and then everything just comes. Mhm. And sometimes it's a stack that big, and sometimes it's just an audiology report.
Hey,
so.
Monica, would, asking the family if they have it as well, instead of having to go
Yes.
through, so if they have the report, could they
Yeah.
email it or send it to us that way?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. And even if they have a physical copy, and if you guys want to take it, we can make a copy and you guys can return that at a visit, and we can get it scanned in. So however, you can take a picture with your phone, save those JPEGs to the child's files as that documentation. So you can even scan through your iPhone, through your note. My mom showed me. She was really proud of that one. So, there's lots of ways that we can have that without having to track down a medical system. So yeah, if the family has it, that would be a lovely way to access it easier.
If they say that during the intake, I'll either ask them to send it to me or have it available at the evaluation for the evaluation.
Perfect. I'm so glad you're here, Tracy. Yes, Lori.
Can we just scan in the one page that says Johnny received a diagnosis? Or do we need the whole report?
Well, I think on the bottom report, it always says like page 1 of 6. So it would be preferred to have the whole report.
Or 26?
Yeah.
I mean, that's where my head is.
Right. One page is better than 0.
Okay.
All
I
the
know.
pages are ideal.
I will be taking 26 pictures.
Right, no.
There won't be time for
No,
Yeah.
there will not be time for that. That is absolutely true. That is a ridiculous ask. Yeah. It would be ideal to have the whole report. That would be considered a complete outside report.
So if we do an evaluation on a child who is not showing a 25% delay in any area, and the mom mentioned there's IUGR, but she doesn't have any documentation on that, do we go ahead and qualify them and pursue the documentation to be able to support that auto qualify?
I would go ahead and what I would do is instead of qualifying the child, let's extend that evaluation. So we might not bring it, the evaluation team may not bring it to team, but that FSC may be working with mom to get that documentation. And once we have it, then we can go ahead and move forward writing that IFSP, and the family's delaying it, right? Because they don't have access to the records. So that's our reason. So we can extend the evaluation process to get the information we need. The other option is you do use informed clinical opinion, but again, we've got to get that medical piece because that's the tie to making that kiddo auto eligible.
And so under informed clinical opinion, child qualifies for services due to parent report, informed clinical opinion due to parent report of IUGR, and leave it at that.
Yes, yes.
And get the documentation.
Yeah, that's what I would do. And then once we have that documentation, we can go in and we can edit that reason to make it auto eligible instead of informed clinical opinion.
So that would need to be like a review to change it,
That's
or
what I
we would
wondered.
update it?
The only time you need to do a formal review is when you're changing outcomes, services, exiting, having any kind of transition plan. So yeah, so you would let the family know, but technically they've already signed that prior written notice that says the child is eligible. And on there, it doesn't say why they're eligible. It just says they're eligible. So again, changing the eligibility reason, you don't need to do an IFSP review, but if it's happening naturally at a 6-month review, then you can just do it. Otherwise you just, yeah, you can just go in and even change it in the database side and do the next review. Yeah.
In terms of the ASD diagnosis, I don't know that I've ever had a family that received a paper copy at the appointment. It's usually emailed to them. So I think that might be an easier way to get the full report, to have family email it to you instead of taking
Yeah.
the whole message.
So that's what I would think too. Yeah, it's not very often. And then now too, they have portals, right? So everything is in the portal anyway. And sometimes the families have to go in and download if they can remember their password to the portal.
With ophthalmology.
Right. Ooh, Rudolph pulls ahead. Very exciting stuff. Okay. It's the math question.
Have no issue. No.
No, yeah.
I haven't had math since high school.
Oh, darn.
This is in here at my house. So yes, one of the reasons that I wanted to talk about the 25% delay, and in the office, actually, Amy, would you in the office and grab those, like that age equivalent chart? There's a really nice chart, again, if you're a paper person, if not, there's an electronic copy that says 25% delay, and it has the chronological ages and what the delay needs to be. This job is a lot of math. You've got to figure out what's a 25% delay, what's a 20% delay. So again, it would be an easy way for you guys just to have that chart available. If you wanted, yeah, if you want to just take some and, yeah, I was making copies and it stopped. So I don't know how many copies there are.
I have that screenshotted on my phone. If anybody else does that.
Yeah, but this will help. Again, when you walk into a home and the child's 30 months old, you should already have the math figured out what the month delay is in your head for this child to qualify for services. So you don't have to kind of guess and figure that out. And one of the reasons, again, eligibility keeps coming up is we've got a lot of people doing eligibility. Infant toddler used to have an eval team. So there were about maybe 15 of us doing eval. And then we went to 3 evaluators and that was it. But that's not great because on the back end, it's hard for you guys to know what it looks like when they don't qualify, when you're not determining when they do qualify. So really knowing what that development looks like at the beginning, what we expect for that age, and then figuring out what % of delay, what is that month equivalent? So lots of math and early intervention. Questions about this? In Missouri, it's easy. It's 50%. You just got to chop that number in half, right? Kansas made it a little bit harder. So
Water's making a comeback.
Pants of pants.
She was in like 24 and 12.
He goes in like
16.
You're like, and then it's like 24.8. What is that?
Perfect. So 24 months, we know a quarter of that, divide 24 by 4, that's 6. Their skills need to fall at or below 18 months old to qualify for services with a 25% delay.
Monica, you can also take it times 0.75, right?
I want to do it my way.
What?
Yeah, that's how I do it. It's like I learned a different way to do math. And I'll tell you what, if I asked my daughters this question, they would have an entirely different way to figure out the same answer. So however your math turns out is totally fine. Casey says you can take the age, times it by 0.75, and that also gives you, yeah, see, back in my day, we didn't have calculators, you know, on our phones. We had to do this all in our heads. Rudolph likes math. Who's Rudolph? Wait, don't tell me. It's too exciting. True. I'm gonna give the false people maybe some credit though, because I didn't specify which kind of drugs. As Carrie I saw Carrie nodding her head out of my peripheral vision, right?
I would not.
For the most part, yes, drug exposure with the exception of TCH, marijuana. Otherwise, all other drugs are considered. What is TCH?
You said it so confidently too. You must be a real stoner, Monica. This is a cover up.
Clearinghouse. The clearinghouse. Yeah. No more math, no more drugs. That's on film too, that I said TCH.
Perfect. At least you said.
Hey, it's good cover.
Good. That's
Good
good.
cover.
Good cover.
Yeah.
I think it's all.
Oh, I thought there'd be a
Look at that. It's
conversation.
pretty fancy. Yeah, so again, I wanted to talk about this with the group. As I've been going out and doing eval observations, the eval teams have been doing a really nice job of at the end of the eval summarizing the results. If it's Carrie and me talking about the areas I'm comfortable with, social, language, play, asking about to Carrie. Carrie, what did you see? Carrie talks about the areas, shares some developmental milestones. And then based on that information, we would normally see a 24-month-old saying 50 words. He's saying 5, that would make him eligible, blah, 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 and then moving forward. So sometimes I think we think because it's called the FSC role and the evaluator role, sometimes I feel like we think one person is deciding eligibility, and it's really not. It's supposed to be a team decision. So again, feel free to have those conversations. There's lots of times kids are right on the fence, and it's like, what do you do? And it's okay to have that conversation with your eval partner. It's okay to have that conversation with the parent. you don't have to have all of the answers right away, and sometimes talking out loud also helps. And a lot of you guys are brand new eval partners. As you get more and more used to one another, you can kind of look across the room, and I know what Carrie is thinking right now, and she knows what I'm thinking. That takes a while, those relationships and dynamics. So again, make sure that you guys are including your eval partner in those conversations. For those of us that are new to infant toddler, talk with your eval partner and maybe say, hey, I'm really comfortable talking about language, but I'm not comfortable talking about play. Could you maybe help summarize that for me? We try and put new people to infant toddler with veteran people to kind of help with that process, because we don't expect someone 2 months into the job to be able to summarize 3 developmental domains. That's not realistic. So again, lean into your eval partner, let them know what you're comfortable with. Eval partners, talk to your eval, your eval partner, find out, where are they at in their learning? What are they comfortable sharing? Again, the whole idea is to share as much as we can with families so they're more informed about their child's development when we're letting them know whether or not their child's eligible for services. Questions?
What if you're on the fence and you wanna have a conversation with your eval partner, but you're not comfortable saying your concerns in front of them?
Ooh. Who has this happened to before, and how did you handle it? Look at that coaching, Mary Ellen.
Good job.
Thanks. There are options. One of them is, do you need more information to make a decision about eligibility? Do you need to observe them in another environment? Maybe you saw them at home and the concerns are at daycare. Do you need to potentially extend that evaluation and have someone go to daycare? Do you maybe want to come back the following week, one of you guys, to observe another routine? What information is missing to help you make that decision would be one of my first questions. And then how do we get that information? How do we find that? Do you have a specific situation in mind?
Oh, several.
All of them? Yeah. I guess my question would be, why would you be concerned about having a conversation about their child's development? Like, what would be the catalyst to not wanting to do that in front of
A lot
the
of
family?
times it's when I have concerns about characteristics of autism and I don't know where the parents are, or I get a sense that that is not something that they want to hear or talk about. And I think just having met them, I'm not comfortable just sort of saying what my concerns are to my eval partner with the parent just listening.
And I think that's a great example. And I think that there are ways of talking around a diagnosis such as autism by talking about what you're seeing developmentally. So maybe you don't say he or she's showing characteristics of autism, but maybe you talk about, I'm seeing delays in social, I'm seeing delays in language, I'm seeing delays in play. So maybe you're talking about the 3 big areas of development, but you're not saying, I have concerns about autism. I guess my question is, if what you say to the parents, because we know that child's eligible, right? Because they're showing a delay. We don't need the diagnosis necessarily.
If they're not necessarily showing a delay, but they're showing characteristics that are potentially like, and again, then this is why I maybe would be on the fence. I'm not saying, well, she's definitely, delayed in her play skills or her social skills. But if I'm just seeing like, this is different.
Are you saying more of that conversation with your partner, to see if they see the same things? Is that what you're asking? Because I'm gonna say you're my partner and you do a beautiful job with that discussion and bringing those and describing what their development is without ever once mentioning autism. And it's always cluing me into what you're looking at and like it makes me think of my 3 areas and how I'm observing them under that lens. So
one of the things that I tend to do is go back to things that I heard the parents tell me they were concerned about or that caused the referral. And what would you like that to look like, or how can that look differently? Because then that allows that conversation between the 2 evaluators to hear what that other person's thinking without saying it, and then dive a little deeper into how to come back to the decision of making that referral, making that eligibility decision.
And that might be too, I think no one thing is gonna work for every single family in every single situation. And informed clinical opinion would be a potential reason to qualify, and talking about that, you know, developmentally, she's meeting milestones, she's saying as many words as we would like. But is the quality okay? You know, what does the quality of the play look like? So maybe talking more about the quality of the milestones versus the quantity and that measurable part of it too.
And using, sometimes I can use the word like consistency across routines. Be like, oh, she does a really good job. She has lots of vocabulary, but it's not very consistent at daycare. She's not really using her words at daycare, blah, blah, blah. Then kind of touch on that. So like consistency, so that we don't have to say like, I know we're trying to get away from like scattered skills and things like that, which still comes out of my mouth all the time, but yeah, I like consistency. And then we can talk about, and I think it's okay to talk in front of the parents about using informed clinical opinion and kind of letting them know what that means, correct? Because that's kind of what I've done, like, yeah, I'm kind of on the fence. And then I start talking about like, well, what kind of support do you feel like you need? And then that kind of, not that, and I don't want to put it in the parent's lap, like, it's up to you if you want your child to qualify, because that's not really what we're doing. And then I feel like parents get really nervous about that too. But just letting them know what their feelings and support are is helping me qualify their child.
Absolutely.
Well, not me, but the team.
Yes, correct. And Luke, did you have?
Yeah, I was gonna say, you can also just reconvene with that second tester as well and make the decision outside of that zone and just let them know we've got a lot of information here. We need to go back to the office or whatever, digest everything we've seen today, and then we'll give you our judgment on whether they're qualified for services or not. And I know some people have like signed the does not qualify page and say, we'll delete this, you know, if they do end up being eligible. So
You can
petition for that later.
Yeah, you can always buy yourself some more time. If you feel like in that moment, you don't have it all together. Sometimes, you know, right away, and those decisions are easy, and sometimes they're not. So again, we have a process of where we do an eval and we make that child eligible that day or not. And again, there's some wiggle room there. It doesn't have to look exactly the same for every child, and we can gather more information, buy ourselves more time, see a different environment, things like that. Yes.
This kind of goes off of what Stacy was saying, but at evaluation, should we be sharing with parents the areas their child is eligible in? So I think a lot of times we talk around like, you know, those areas, but we don't specifically say why the child's eligible. How do you feel about that?
So I would, of course, again, this is me, right? I'm sharing what I remember doing, and what I think is best for the family is to be the most informed as possible about their child's development. And I think when we don't share information with them because we're uncomfortable, I think that becomes an ethical issue because we're withholding information about their child that I feel like is important for every family to know. So yes, again, you don't have to say autism. You don't have to say the medical term. We can't diagnose that or not, but we should be saying, I'm seeing delays in social, I'm seeing delays in language, I'm seeing delays in play, self-help. We should be talking about those areas because, to be perfectly honest, you guys are including that on the IFSP anyway. It's on page 2. And so when you go to write the IFSP and that's the first time the family's hearing and seeing that, that's confusing for them. Again, remember, whatever you say, a parent's probably going to retain 5%. You guys are going to retain 5% of what we talk about today. So we don't have to talk and talk and talk, but again, providing them with enough information that they can be informed about where their child is. A lot of our families don't have a background in development. They really don't know what they're supposed to do or not supposed to do. So again, that's part of what we want to do as continuing education anyway. So yes, I think that would be great.
Monica, I will say that a lot of the families do ask at the intake if they're gonna know if their child is eligible. And so a lot of times I'll just say, You'll know at the end of the evaluation, some people will tell you specifically what their areas of concern were, and then you can ask questions of them at that point.
Mhm.
So
Monica?
they do wanna know.
I think it's gotten a little bit harder when we stopped using the help because that was so nice. So one thing that I'll do is pull out my help, look at the kiddo's age, just kind of go over those sections, so I know what I'm looking for. So I feel more confident talking about those other areas that are outside my expertise.
Yeah, the help is a great tool to learn typical development across birth to 3. It's really how I feel like I learned what to expect at certain ages. And so those of you who are coming in to this disastrous eval tool that we're using, to be honest, like I'm super sad because it doesn't help you become a better professional. It doesn't help a veteran professional become a better professional. It's confusing and it's not awesome. So yeah, so I think having a help is great. It is a very detailed tool and really helps kind of support those milestones. I'm gonna go on. True or false?
We're not gonna turn that into a trick question.
To be true question.
I know what I mean, so.
So the-
How long
that
that-
so far, and then the number on the other side.
Always, never, like, right? That those 31. But yes, we should always summarize.
Even if the summary means we need to think on it,
Correct.
we're still
Yes.
summarizing.
Yes. It's okay. You guys are not wizards. You're not supposed to know everything all of the time. It's totally okay to say exactly how Luke said it. We gathered a lot of information. Luke and I, we're gonna go back to the office. We're gonna talk through things and I'm gonna call you and we'll walk through blah, 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 blah. Again, identify who's gonna contact the parent. Don't just leave it up in the air. That's not great. But yeah, we can absolutely buy ourselves more time if we need to. We're gonna have this phone ahead today. And this means the primary service provider.
Oh. Oops, darn it. I didn't answer it soon enough.
I know Amy Wilcox was like, you might take longer on some of these. So this is something kind of brand new that we've started doing. And as you're getting IFSP reviews back from the liaisons, we're including this in there. We don't expect you guys to remember it, but part of your IFSP meeting, you are reviewing that eval information. So you are considered an evaluator. So we are asking that you guys go ahead and include your name on that second page of the IFSP. So there may be 3 people sometimes. It may be the 2 evaluators and you, or if you were part of the eval team, there may just be 2 people. But again, what that does is that allows us to some opportunity to, if we only have one person that was able to go to an eval, and the FSC is a different discipline, that person can put them on the IFSP and that becomes a second discipline. Does that make sense?
Oh, okay, because I thought many times we take a child and the decision's made,
Correct.
but we're now added to the page.
Correct.
So we're not contributing to the decision.
You are, yes. So on the,
Not really, because it's been decided and that's why I've taken the child to do the IFSP.
but you're part of the eval. And they're actually signing that they're eligible the day of the IFSP meeting. You're there the day of the eligibility meeting. So you should be one of the determining people about eligibility.
That's another one of those tricks. That's questions.
They're not supposed to be. They're supposed to be really easy and simple.
I
Yeah.
have a question from someone about that. Does the PSP add themselves at the IFSP meeting, or is that the FSC eval's job?
I think I'd do it at the IFSP meeting. Yeah, because you should be going through the pages anyway. You can plop your name on there. Yeah.
Where the name goes on page 2, are you referring to the bottom portion where it says primary service, or are you referring to, yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Where it's like the spot where you would put like a third person?
Both.
Okay, I don't think I've ever done that before.
No, this is kind of brand new that we
Okay,
started doing.
Good.
This isn't gonna have it on there because this is an older kiddo that's been in services.
Number 3, got
Yeah,
it.
number 3, you should put your name here.
Okay.
If you forget,
Oh, I thought you were talking about under FSC role. Okay, I got you.
yeah,
Thanks for asking that.
So it should be in both places, essentially.
yeah, you are the FSC, but you're also considered one of the evaluators. Yeah.
Moving forward, that is gonna be, looks like, I
And-
love it.
And if you forget, is this the end of the world?
No.
No, it's not. Just something that we're trying to do to really make sure we've got all the disciplines and a really thorough documentation of who's part of the team.
This might be like a little bit tangent, but as the third evaluator then, is it ever appropriate to change an echo score after you've met the kid?
Yes, it is a draft IFSP, which means that it can be changed, and oftentimes is changed, whether that's new routines the families added or different priorities or whatever. So yes, the eval team has indicated what they thought the echo score should be, but if you get in there, you're doing the IFSP, you're seeing something different, feel free to change the echo scores. Yes, that's totally fine.
Can you edit an echo or do you have to delete it and do a new one?
It's just on the echo tab, so you would just
Oh,
change
right,
it.
right,
Yeah,
right.
Okay, that's fine.
That one's a lot of fun. If anyone gets this wrong.
yeah. Do we even need to talk about this?
The test should not be made, right?
I'm having trouble whistling today.
The doctors do it
Very nice. Till 24 months of age. Yep, that's when the health professionals also do it too. So we kind of align with them as well.
I have a question.
Yes.
So if we're adjusting for prematurity, what do we base the 25% delay on?
The adjusted age. Was this a trick question?
I don't know.
She's trying to.
And FYI,
I was
for everybody to just
Yeah.
remember.
Yes. So when you adjust for prematurity, you base the 25% delay off the adjusted age. Stump the chump. Nice try, Kelly Mason.
It came out wrong.
I know. I want to get it in. I totally can.
I would have been so freaked out if everybody picked green. Yes, the eligibility date is the same date as the initial IFSP. Who wants to share why that is?
Because I signed the prior written notice for eligibility on that day.
Correct. So in your initial IFSP consent forms, there's 2 prior written notices. The first is eligibility. The second is for the initial IFSP. Katie eloquently said that's when the family's signing the eligibility prior written notice. So that is your eligibility date. Yes.
Monica, is that just, because I know that evaluations are done differently across the state, is that because that's how we do our evaluations?
That is how almost every program does them, even including Part B. So you have time to review the eval information to determine eligibility. Plus, there's some issues if you use the eval date, there's some issues with transition and you're out of compliance for sending URFs and scheduling transition conferences. So most of the time, programs use the eligibility date, and the initial IFSP date is the same. We've got a consistent group of 5 here.
Great.
I feel like Luke's conversation really helps steer the answers to this one. Way to go, Luke. So we've got a couple really fun situations right now where kids are in foster care and bio parents are involved and foster parents are involved. And when we do evals, we tend to, again, do them in one location and maybe not include the other information. We have got a family situation as well, whether mom and dad can't even communicate due to a restraining order and some other things custody-wise. So we need to make sure that we're gathering information from the parties involved with the child. So both parents, if the parents aren't living together. Poor sweet Courtney, who's just joined our team, probably wonders why with a situation she has on her caseload right now, but bio parents and foster parents. And so what does that look like when we have a child who we evaluate in one environment, but that something's happening in another environment? Another great example is there's behaviors at daycare and we eval at home. We didn't actually see the concern area at the concern location. So again, using that same phrasing that Luke used, we gathered a lot of information. It would be really helpful if one of us could go to daycare to observe during the classroom, and you guys buy yourself some more time to make that informed clinical opinion. We tend to think we have to decide that day, and we really don't. We've done that as an organization because we have so many kids coming in and out of our program, and most of the time it works, but we don't always have to do it. So again, if you need or want to have dad involved, maybe the eval was at mom's and you want to have a Zoom with dad or talk with dad, you can absolutely do that. Same thing at daycare.
Would the 45 days stay the same then?
The 45 days stays the same, family delayed because you needed to gather more information.
Okay.
Yeah.
Even though the family isn't the one delaying.
Correct. I'm gonna edit that out on this YouTube Zoom link, but yeah, so the family is the dad though, and the dad wasn't in, let's say it's a mom and dad situation. The dad wants to contribute and dad wasn't there. So yes, the family's delaying, the dad wants to share information as well. So we think, again, we lean into the gray area for these late reasons. Yes. I think Casey, did you have your hand?
That was it.
That was it, yeah. If you're running close on that 45-day timeline, reach out to your liaison, reach out to me. We will creatively craft a reason, and a lot of it is like we just need to gather more information. Again, this isn't going to happen in every situation, but it's available if and when you guys need to use it. Again, to buy yourself some more time. That makes sense. And let's see how Rudolph's doing.
It's me.
I went with green. Casey, that's what I told you. I immediately thought of Casey on the floor with the dogs. She's like, oh, a kid lives here? Cool.
Close, medium.
Judgment, informed clinical opinion. It is designed to be, and I want you guys to keep this in the back of your head, it is designed to be a reason children are eligible because we see a delay, but testing does not support that. We know it's not going to with the APS 3 anyway, period. But I really want you guys to think about this, because the way our program works, referrals come in, they're assigned to an eval team. If the child qualifies, the child goes to team to staff for primary. The way the primary service provider model was designed to be is a referral comes in, it goes straight to the team determines who's evaluating that child. They do the eval, one of the evaluating people take that child if they qualify. So we have a middle step in there where we have an eval team determining eligibility. And sometimes our eval teams find a child eligible based on informed clinical opinion. Sometimes a different primary takes that child and goes into the home and doesn't see the same things the evaluating team saw. So one of the things I want you guys to think about and really consider is if you're using professional judgment to qualify a child, really consider taking this child on your caseload. You saw what was going on in the home. You heard what was going on in the home. It's not, again, nothing's ever 100%, but that is going to help, I think, decrease some of this. I'm not sure why this child qualified. You guys probably spent an hour and a half in the home. So something happened to help you determine that. The other thing I'm going to ask is if you took a child that you did not find eligible and the child qualified on professional judgment, please, please, please have a conversation with the eval team before you contact the family and go to the home. What did they see? What did they hear? What happened? Hopefully you guys have time after the agenda to do that, but if not, making those phone calls is really important because that's how we're going to continue to fine tune eligibility. And I know professional judgment, clinical informed clinical opinion is the grayest area of them all. I think in the law, it was designed to be for developmental domain areas that are difficult to measure. 25% delay. Feeding, behavior, social emotional. We tend to use it for everything, which is fine. But again, what we're saying is that child has a significant enough delay to qualify for special education. So really think about that. Like kids can still have delays and not need special education. And that's where I think sometimes there's a little bit of a miscommunication. So just keep that in the back of your head. But do, or if you're an evaluating team and someone else has taken that, please, that eval team, contact the primary to share the little bits and pieces that you guys saw and heard that made you lean into that informed clinical opinion. So this is a hard one. This is a really hard one. And this looks different across the state. Different programs lean into it and other Part C programs do not. So questions, I feel like this is the hottest button topic related to eligibility right now. Thoughts about this?
Monica?
Yes.
One thing that I've challenged myself to do is those kids that I do use professional judgment, I go back and reread what the FSC put on the agenda. So I feel like it really explains why the kid was qualified. And if I'm not at team meeting or whatever, just so that whoever takes it knows exactly why they ended up getting selected
And do
the eligibility.
Yeah, and that's a good point too, because right now the way it's situated is Amy and Luke, so I always pick Luke because he's a PT and it usually come to mind. If they're doing an eval on a child with language delays, Luke's going to be including that information on the agenda. That's just how it's structured right now. So that's great, kind of following up to make sure that that gets written on there. As we move into January, you guys are going to have assigned roles on assigned days. So Luke's always going to be FSC on Tuesday, and he's always going to be the RBI evaluator role on Wednesdays. So we're going to make those on the calendar. Tracy, you might not know that yet, but so
I did actually.
Okay.
Already scheduled it for January, so they're coming across. I did not put anybody down as FSC. I'm just leaving it blank because they're scheduled in January.
Perfect. The team liaisons and I are going to be making those edits, so those are ready to roll. But that way you guys have equal opportunity to do RBIs and equal opportunity to do the FSC role. Sometimes we do a lot of RBIs, and then that means a lot of my child stories and not in. People don't like to write those. Yes. Sound like that.
What if I have to do once in my life here? What if you go and you do the initial IFSC, which this would always happen because I can do them on Zoom now, but if I go in person and the child really obviously does not have a delay and the parent is on board and also agrees and is no longer concerned, can you just have them sign that, like did not qualify, Kate, like what would the next steps for that be? You don't, I assume you don't write the initial IFSP or have.
Right. And this has happened before too, where, you know, or an infant with torticollis. So you get out there and it's kind of resolved. Like there are situations this happens. And so there are a couple options. One is you can just exit the child with the reason parent declined after eval before IFSP. The other one is you could actually pull up a prior written notice and mark down not eligible and have the family sign that. That is probably the more preferred utopian way to have a special education paperwork trail. And that's totally, again, you're part of the eval team. That's totally fine to do that. And sometimes that happens. Or behaviors may be resolved because they change daycares or, you know, just different things are going on. So yeah, so if you get in there, it's totally fine to have that conversation with the family. You guys might also say, hey, let's not write the IFSP now. Let me come back in 3 or 4 weeks to see how he's doing. And again, that eval is just extended. And maybe in 3 or 4 weeks, you know, can then move forward with either writing an IFSP or exiting because they're not eligible. So there is lots of flexibility. We just have never really discussed it because sometimes flexibility makes people anxious, right?
I feel like that with protocols, the kids that we get are sent with plagioccephaly, prefer one side, and they're like less than 2 months old, and it's like, and you want to show the parents, and I feel like that's where you end up with the kid on your caseload, and you're just like, oh my gosh, like then they're fine, you know, it just becomes a lot of work for.
And so maybe that would be a situation where you don't write the IFSP, but maybe you just schedule, like, again, a visit every 2 or 3 weeks just to pop in, and then at some point you can exit them. So, you know, there are some different things that you guys can do. And I do know the infants with torticollis is kind of it's a lot of work for the OTs and PTs when they're in and out of service quick like that. Okay, we've got 4 questions left.
I think this is the first question.
I heard 3 questions. If a child is automatically eligible, they're always eligible until they turn 3. So you cannot exit them for not being eligible. That would have to be a removal of a diagnosis from a doctor.
And then they're not.
Right, but they're automatically eligible. So that would be a removal of a medical diagnosis.
Tricky.
I can't award you points, I'm sorry. It's just the way the system is.
Monica, what
So-
about the new things we were talking about with seizures? They weren't controlled and now they're controlled.
Right, so if they
I
qualify
doubt that.
and they're eligible, so then you might move them to informed clinical opinion.
Oh, so you're changing the eligibility.
Yes.
Therefore, got it.
Yes, yeah, that child would no longer be eligible based on auto eligible, but are they informed clinical opinion? So if the medical diagnosis changes,
Correct.
of course, that makes them not automatically eligible anymore.
Got it.
Yeah. I will be way more specific next time on these true false questions. These are tricky, you guys. They're not meant to be tricky. This is a good one. This has come up a lot recently.
Yellow.
Yes, a week after the eval. So our agency policy is after an evaluation, you've got a week to get that draft IFSP ready. So if you take a child today at team, please don't schedule the IFSP for the next day, because I can almost guarantee that eval team is probably not going to have the draft ready. So give your eval team a little bit of leeway when you're scheduling that. If you schedule it before that week, just shoot them an email. Hey, I've got this scheduled for Tuesday the 14th. So give them a little bit of heads up, but The policy is a week after the eval, we want the information from the eval inputted into the draft, so it's ready. Make sense? The minute the eval is over.
No,
That's not, I
I definitely
definitely
know.
want that one.
because no one's missing any.
Oh, Karen.
Ooh, two questions left.
Yes, not twins, brothers, but yeah.
Yes, enter the eligibility date in the database before locking the IFSP. I'm gonna pop this up real quick, but what happens is on the actual IFSP, there is the important date section at the very, very bottom. Which you can see right here, and the initial eligibility date is on here. That is entered on the database side. So if you lock the IFSP and then you enter the eligibility date, it never appears in the document. Once that document is locked, information doesn't ebb and flow. So as soon as you, or before you, lock the IFSP, come into your eligibility tab, and then you just do your date determined eligible here. And then this is where you mark your child auto eligible on the database side.
So if moving forward, always, if we forget to do that after locking the review, we can't go and lock it and add that date because that's changing it.
So moving forward, if you forget, I would unlock it, add your date, and lock it, because that's an important date. And then you'll have to download a new PDF.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But not we don't need a review for that.
No, you do not need a review for
Because
that.
we're not going to goals or services.
Correct.
No, just
Yeah.
mark and CompuClaim open to add eligibility date.
Don't even do that.
Really?
Not unless you want to. If you want to be really thorough, you can.
No, thank you.
Okay.
Emailing me saying, Teresa, you didn't document.
Last question. Yes, so these are at-risk kids that aren't eligible for a program just because they're at risk. However, we may want to follow up with the family in a month or two just to check in and see how they're doing. See if they want to complete an ASQ online. Are they connected with parents as teachers? Do they just need some more ideas of things to work on? So sometimes I think we put it in the family's hands to contact us, but on occasion we go in a home and we walk out and we're like, I don't know, like, so I didn't feel good about that. It's okay to talk with the family and say, hey, are you okay if I reach out with you in another month or two to see how it's going? Again, I don't expect this all the time, but if you've got kiddos that you've evaluated that you feel like would be really good to make sure we've got follow-up, you guys have the capability to do this if this is something that you want to do. Not required, just something the state encourages as part of that overall tracking system.
We wouldn't bill for that, correct? Like we wouldn't document that in contract.
We would not document in CompuClaim. Sorry, Bethany's lost her voice.
I haven't had a voice for like 5 days.
I think if you do that, I would document in CompuClaim. Yep, just that you follow. Yeah, I would just put in as family service coordination that you did that. Yep. Okay. Let's see.
Oh boy.
Katie. Came in third place, Bethany.
Well, at least we picked the right people.
Yeah.
Again, winner's table.
What? $1 gift cards, QT, Panera, or Starbucks?
Man, I thought these were gonna be extra Sonic gift cards.
Panera? Okay.
Like, what are you gonna get?
Oh, you don't get a choice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow.
I know, those two.
This game.
It's from the Raptors.
She is really.
Okay,
See, we're used to being.
let's talk about CDC milestones. How do you guys feel about that?
Marathon.
Okay, we're gonna do two things. I'm gonna go through the information today. I think once you hear what I'm about to say, I think you'll feel a little bit more ease. I'm gonna also send you a link for a Kansas American Academy of Pediatrics, an AAP webinar that they did back in April. It is literally, when you get on, it's like 45 minutes. It's not. It's like 20 minutes of information and 20 minutes of questions. Don't listen to the questions. Just listen to the 20 minutes. We'll go through kind of what happened and why, and what it means for parents and what it means for professionals. So the CDC milestones were updated back in 2008, and then not again until just recently. And so there were a couple things happening that led to this decision by the CDC and the American Academy of Pediatrics. And the biggest one was the milestones were confusing. They're designed for parents. They're not designed for us, to be perfectly honest. We don't use them for eligibility. We don't really use them for anything, but they're really designed for providers, medical providers like doctors, pediatricians, and they're designed for parents. Because they were set at a 50th percentile, the CDC and the American Academy of Pediatrics felt like they were very, very confusing because doctors were like, well, 50% aren't. So let's just wait and see. And then what was happening was referrals were not being made to early intervention programs. So the wording was also confusing. For example, the milestone for sitting said begins to sit at 6 months back in the I keep saying 2008. The 2008 milestones, whereas now they say sits at 9 months. So they've taken out really confusing words like begins to, may, might. They've eliminated all of those so parents can read this and be like, okay, it's 9 months, my kid is not sitting. I need to talk to my pediatrician about this. Also, what is begins to sit? Is that sitting, in tripod? Is that sitting all by yourself? Is that sitting and leaning? Like there's so much. And so they really wanted to make these as simple as possible for parents to understand. There were also lots of milestones that were repeated. So they were in multiple domain areas. And again, why they did this is because only 25% of kids are receiving early intervention services before age 3, but yet 1 in 6 kids are having delays in development. So there's a lot of kids who are not getting referred to early intervention. And so they really wanted to take the information and they wanted to simplify it so parents could follow it and learn it. They've also tried to organize the screenings, the developmental screenings, to correlate with the well child visits too. So if you think about your ASQs, they're done at 9, 18, and 30 months at well child visits. The MCHAT is recommended to be administered at 18 and 24 months. So that's a lot of screenings within that period of time. The MCHAT is the one that's being kind of replaced, I feel like, by a different screening tool, but for the most part right now, we're still using the MCHAT. So what they really wanted to do is they wanted to take the milestones and they wanted to correlate them with the well child visit. So every time a parent and a pediatrician could get together and talk about what was happening at 6 months, what's happening at 9 months, 12 months, 15 months, 18 months. And they weren't organized like that before. And so it was extremely confusing. So what they did instead was they made them be 75th percentile. So now you can say, okay, 75% of children are sitting by 9 months. And if your child isn't, your child's in the bottom 25%. So again, that should be a referral conversation with your pediatrician, a referral for early intervention services. One of the other things that they talked about in this webinar was they, which I really liked this last one, and I thought that kind of correlates with what we do. They wanted all families to have access to be able to test the milestones on their own, regardless of culture, demographics, socioeconomic status. And so they removed milestones that you need special equipment, special toys, special objects to test. And so any of the milestones that are on the CDC list now can be done in the family's home, and you don't need puzzles, shape sorters, blocks, just different things like that, if that makes sense. going through and these were all organized by the CDC and the American Academy of Pediatrics. They started all of their reviewing back in 2017-18, and they were completed by 2019. They were published in 2022, and so a lot of us thought it was COVID related, but they had already started this process several years before COVID. However, with the timing of everything, it just kind of it wasn't great because a lot of us thought they were specifically revised due to COVID, and it was just time to revise them. So these are the criteria that they looked at for revising the milestones. They wanted to be answered by yes, not sure, or not yet. Instead of maybe, starting to, sometimes, again, all those super vague answers. They also wanted to organize the milestones in a progression of skills. So you could look across, birth to 5 years old, and you could see that progression of skills. They wanted to include these bottom 3 for parents. So the CDC milestones now have activities that parents can do. They have resources, they have scripts, they have open-ended questions that are asked and encouraged. So families can take that initiative and start asking and advocating for themselves at doctor's appointments instead of waiting for the doctor to make that referral. They're hoping that this actually helps families initiate a little bit better as well. I'm going through this really fast because I feel like you will also have the time to watch the webinar, and it's really good. But the results of all of this were the number of milestones were decreased by 25%. So there's a lot less milestones on there. A lot of them were also moved to older ages because they took out that confusing wording such as begins to or may, and they moved it to an age where they were definitely doing. The milestones now, most of them have normative data, whereas previously the milestones were more of a clinical opinion versus clinical evidence. Crawling is a great example. Crawling isn't on the CDC milestone, and the reason is not that it's not important, but there's so much variability with crawling. Is it army crawling? Is it crawling on all fours? Is it, the crawling where they swing their leg like a pirate, like one of my kids did? So there's all sorts of bear crawling. There's all sorts of types of crawling qualitatively, and kids are doing it at so many different ages. So to eliminate the confusion, they just removed that particular milestone off because they don't have the normative data to figure out exactly when and what that should look like. That's been really confusing. I just had an email from parents as teachers saying, we have a kid who's not crawling. Since that's not a CDC milestone, should we not refer them? And I'm like, well, it's not really the crawling that's important, but what does the quality look like? What are the motor planning? Are they transitioning in and out of sitting? Asking all these questions, and they were like, I don't know. So again, that's one of those things, we get referrals, and sometimes it's for a specific milestone, but it's hard to weed those out on the phone because you don't know what that looks like. So now the milestones, the CDC milestones are in 4 developmental domains: social, emotional, language, cognitive, and motor. So they lumped fine motor, gross motor, and self-help skills into one particular area. Again, not that the other areas aren't important, but they thought it would be easier for families to keep track, thinking about families that may not have high literacy, all the way to families who are very educated and have much higher literacy skills. So again, trying to appease a much wider range of parents having access to this. One of the things I liked the best was they talked about the milestones do not replace validated screening measures. So the ASQ, think ASQ 3. The milestones there, it doesn't replace any of what we do, whether we're using the HELP or the APS 3. It's really, again, these are designed to support parents who don't know what you know about development. So again, someone at the very, very base foundation level, trying to figure out when they may or may not need help. The piece that they're really going to have to watch are these next 2, because these milestones are so new, they don't have the data yet to determine, are more kids getting referred to early intervention sooner? Are more kids accessing early intervention? That data is going to take a while to figure out. but also they have a lot less evidence, interestingly enough, for social emotional and cognitive. The social emotional piece doesn't surprise me because it's still such an early developmental domain area. I think that we've been watching. Some of us have been wondering for 15 years, you know, what we used to say behavior, and now we say social emotional. So that's also going to be really interesting to see how things progress over the next couple of years. So overall, just some quick Q&A that they talked about that I found interesting. They started gathering information. All of this part was completed before 2019. So COVID had no impact at all regarding the milestones. Also with masks, to date, there is no evidence that masks impact development. I know that's a real hot topic. One of the pieces I think about Molly a lot too, working with kids with visual impairments. Kids with visual impairments don't notoriously have language delays. You don't necessarily need to see to be able to talk. So, you know, that was a big part of what we thought was happening regarding language development, but that's not necessarily it. Interestingly, what they're finding is that when women were pregnant and experienced trauma, anxiety, things like that over these last couple of years, that's actually had more impact on brain development than masks. So they're doing a lot of studies, a lot of MRIs now on the infants that have been born, and now they're obviously toddlers and even preschool ages, because they're wondering what is the long-term impact of the chronic stress and anxiety that pregnant moms are going through, especially those that don't have access to shelter and food and resources like that. So just something to think about. Talked a little bit about crawling, and then again, the focus is on revising the milestones. So 75% of the kids are meeting that milestone versus it being 50%, which is really just a let's wait and see kind of approach. So they're trying to eliminate that. And if you guys haven't seen the milestones, they are quick and dirty. Which again, I think about our families, this is something that family regarding, you know, regardless of their ability, should be able either to read or have someone read it to them and be able to comprehend this. So they're not incredibly complex, not like our developmental assessments and even our ASQ, I feel like. So that was the super quick and dirty. I'm going to include, I'll shoot out an email today that has this, that has that chart attached to it, that has the ages, the eligibility, and then the link to watch the 20-minute American Academy of Pediatrics. Kind of tell you have to like dig for it a little bit, but it's a good one. I thought they did a really nice job. So I did it. 4 minutes left. Questions? Yes. I'm happy if you have specific questions. I'm happy to stick around. If you have general questions for the group.
Since now, especially because we're about to, you know, the FSC role and the evaluator role, typically, even though I know it was a joined decision, if it's motor, I'm like, I look to that person. So can we consider having a lunch and learn? You know, I know we have our district meetings, which is great, but I need to know more about motor. And so have a lunch and learn and have maybe a couple of PTs, OTs, just let me know the milestones. Like Courtney was so great earlier this week or last week. She had asked me, can you just send me like a quick blurb of what you're looking for and all that? Because now that kind of switching into that role, it's nice to know. So like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you know, the rules are really designed for one person to do consents and screening and one person to do the RBI. And still you guys are summarizing development together. So you're still going to be talking about the areas that you've determined. Courtney will still be talking about and summarizing the areas that she's determined. That's usually the easiest way. So again, the idea isn't that your role should determine who's initiating that conversation. But I've heard a lot of people say, you know, Carrie, did you get what you needed? Or is there anything else you wanted to ask mom? And that's kind of like, okay, that's our cue, like, you know, wrap it up here. And then move on to that next stage. So again, I think developing little cues like that will also be important, but I'm going to go ahead and say our OTs and PTs would love to do a lunch and learn on milestones, right, Teresa? Teresa thinks they would too.
I don't have children, and so I never really looked at those. And the only reason I know speech and language is because I've been doing this for 5 years. I mean, you had even said, like, to know how to qualify kids, you have to know typical development. And so, and I was putting together an ACTA has a great like list of milestones. I think they're revising and reviewing it for change in 3 to break it down into months and whatnot, but motor, I really don't have any idea. It's always like, oh, they did qualify. Like, I'm always trying to get it going, and I have no idea if the child didn't qualify or not. I'm just kind of like waiting, and Bethany, you're very, very vague. And so
She called you out. I just got called out.
it's on their face, Bethany, I'm like,
Just need to be more expressive.
I think that is something we can absolutely do. I don't think that would be a problem. And it's nice just to have like little things to look for, like, the pinky toe rolling up when they squat, or like just these little things that you learn over the years that you keep in the back of your head. And that's why it's nice to have, like, we like putting an ECSE or a speech with an OT or a PT. Like, we like doing that as much as we can, because you learn so much from listening to your evaluation partner talk out loud to themselves sometimes in an eval, and talk with the parent too. So, that's those incidental learning opportunities that we want to create for you guys, so you don't have to seek it out, and slowly over time you learn enough to be dangerous. So yeah, absolutely. Hey, we did it. We're now educated on eligibility.
She's so big.
Yeah.
So green one. I just like only